Hey, Pastor Scott here. It's starting to get real, really isolated. News is real. It was fun for a bit, maybe, but all of a sudden, the stay-at-home orders, the lack of being able to do things, the lack of connection, a lot of feelings and talk of isolation. We're isolated in our homes. People are dying alone. Even the introverts are wanting to get out and amongst people. We're finding the need to get connected. As I was preparing my message for this past Sunday, I came across a story that is timely as well as a good reminder. The 13th century, the German King Frederick II conducted a diabolical experiment to discover what language children would naturally grow up speaking if never spoken to. He was sure it would be German. To him, that premise seemed obvious, and it just needed to be proven. So to prove it, King Frederick took babies from their mothers at birth and placed them in the care of the nurses who were forbidden to speak in their presence. He also imposed a second, equally cruel rule. The nurses were not allowed to touch the infants. They were instructed to leave them alone with no physical or emotional contact. Due to their horrific response, Frederick had to cut his experiment short. The tragedy revealed something very significant regarding human nature. As you may have guessed, the babies never grew to speak any language because they all died. It was an Italian historian in 1248 who made the scientific observation about the infants of Frederick's inhumane study. And he said they could not live without petting, human touch. The babies literally died from a lack of that human touch and being left alone. Wow. It's hard for us to imagine, and yet here we are in a time of isolation. Even modern science is now proving that humans are better together, that we are literally engineered, created to be with one another, that we actually flourish when we spend time in the presence of others who love us. Sadly, the opposite is also true. When we're left alone, a phenomenon modern medicine calls failure to thrive becomes a part of that reality. So here we are in the time of isolation. So how do we stay connected? We've got families and other households that people are crawling all over each other, but we also have those who are living alone. How is connection and community experienced? For those hunkered in safety, maybe in fear, how does one venture out? And so in this time of isolation and physical distancing, a term that I prefer better than social distancing, because we all have to be creative in our socializing, but physical distance is going to keep us safe and healthy. All of us need connection. This is an opportunity to move beyond the known and live into the needed, but in ways that we had not thought about before. The Great Commandment from Matthew 22, 36 through 40 reminds us and gives us some very good guidance. I love the way Eugene Peterson translates this in his Bible passage, translation, The Message. Jesus was asked by these religious leaders, and so in verse 36 it picks up. They said, "Teacher, which command in God's law is most important?" Verses 37 through 40, Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God with all your passion and all your prayer and all your intelligence. This is the most important, the first on any list. But there's a second set alongside it. Love others as well as you love yourself. These two commands are pegs. Everything in God's law and the prophets, they hang on them." In this season of Lent, we've been trying to love God more deeply by giving things up and picking up some spiritual practices. But we're also in a season of imposed Sabbath, stay-at-home orders, lack of travel, lack of being able to go to places that we're accustomed to just popping over. And so let us in this season love God. Let us spend time with God that our schedules, our busy schedules, may not have allowed. Let us dial into God's frequency and tune into the still small voice of a God that has been broadcasting, but we've been so busy that we did not hear it. But let us also use the other peg. Let us also love our neighbor in very practical ways. Yes, we're limited by physical distancing, but how can we love our neighbor in practical ways? We can walk the neighborhood and get to know our neighbors. The neighbors that we know and know their name, this is the time that we're getting back into our yards and talking. So get reconnected. It's spring. Pray for your neighbors. As we talked about earlier, pray to the north, pray to the east, pray to the west and the south. Pray for the businesses. Pray for those. Be a lighthouse as you prayer walk. As you walk your neighborhood, let that be a prayer walking station. Let that be a prayer walking experience. Pray for the neighbors that you live amongst the trails that you take. You know, God may actually give you insight and strategy in those moments where you hadn't thought about it, but as you're walking, as you're praying, as you're interacting, the Holy Spirit's going to nudge you and let you know that that's an opportunity. That's a way to do that. That may even be somebody you need to think about and connect with that you may not have normally. Check on your neighbors that live around you. Check on your work neighbors. As you both are at home, this is the chance just to go, hey, we normally would be spending time at work, but how are you doing? Text them, call. Be creative with your neighborhood. Wave to your neighbor. I grew up in rural Indiana, and I learned to wave to everybody. When our boys were little, I'd wave, and they said, do you know them? And I said, no. They go, why'd you wave at them? I said, well, I'm just being friendly. So be like the local farmers and wave. Share. As you're aware of the different needs that you have, God's going to use you. God's going to use me in this unique and crazy time. So let us love God. Let us love neighbor. Let us be connected. We all need it. We don't know when all of this is going to come down and we're going to get back to normal, whatever that is, if normal ever comes again. But we do need to be connected in the middle of it. That's the way we were created. Let's be connected to God, and let's be created to each other. Hey, praying for you. Hang in there.